Shabbat Shalom. This week in Parshat Emor, we continue to study the holiness code of the book of Leviticus, Sefer Vayikra. In it, we read about the Kohanim, the priestly class. V'lo techalalu et shem kodshi v'nikdashti betoch b'nei Yisrael, ani Adonai mekadshechem. You shall not dishonor my holy name. Rather, I should be sanctified among the children of Israel. I am God who sanctifies all of you. Leviticus 22:32. Our sages then interpret this commandment for all Jews. We must all be holy for God and not disrespect God's name. We hear versions of this commandment over and over again through the book of Leviticus. What does it mean? It means that there's a certain expectation of how we behave as Jews. It means that by our actions, we glorify God's existence or we disrespect God's existence. This notion of Kiddush Hashem, glorifying God, and Chilul Hashem, dishonoring God, is codified for us as a mitzvah, as a behavior, as a practice, by Maimonides in his legal work, the Mishnah Torah, in the 12th century. So how do we honor God? How do we fulfill Kiddush Hashem? Well, when I was a child attending Solomon Schechter Day School in Chicago, we heard the same speech every time we went on a field trip. Whether we were going to a museum downtown or a Cubs game at the end of the year, before we got off the bus, the school principal or a teacher would warn us that our behavior in this public space as a group not only reflected on ourselves, but also reflected on our school community and also reflected on the Jewish people at large. If we behaved well, people would look fondly on Jewish people. If we behaved poorly, people would have a negative impression of all Jewish people everywhere because of us. That's Kiddush Hashem, behaving in a way to bring honor to God and to the Jewish people. That's also an example of Jewish guilt. And we know they both work, and we know it's true. When a Jewish person wins an award, we all take great pride. And when a Jewish person behaves unacceptably, we're all disappointed beyond explanation. We all can imagine examples on our own. But how do we act in such a way to honor God when we remain largely at home? I'd argue it's in our good deeds and in our awareness. We all know about the amazing Chesed initiative with which the community has been engaged. Led by Natalie Stenger and Marlon Nolan, volunteers from our board and volunteers from the community at large have called each member of the synagogue and have provided help for members who needed groceries, medicine, etc. The calls continue each and every week. I've spoken about this before. We've expressed our gratitude through emails to each and every volunteer in our community. This is an example of Kiddush Hashem. This week, I'd like to focus on a second path of Kiddush Hashem. We're all at home watching devices and reading devices all day. And all of us can only watch Dr. Anthony Fauci for so many hours a day. So unfortunately, there's a tendency to veer away into the world of distraction and watch Tiger King, or for me, The Last Dance. And that's natural as a brief distraction, but we cannot allow ourselves to indulge like that, but only for brief periods of time. For we have to remain engaged in the world, especially this week as I began learning of a grave tragedy. On February 23rd, Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old African-American man, was murdered in Georgia. His crime was apparently jogging in the wrong neighborhood. The father and son, Gregory and Travis McMichael, who stopped Arbery and allegedly shot him, although I saw it with my own eyes in the video, were not arrested until this past week, more than 2 months later. I have to confess, I did not start following the case until this week. In those 2 months, our society shut down. The synagogue had to convert all of our services and programming to virtual platforms. We had to take care of our loved ones. I had to become educated about the pandemic crisis. And in spite of it all, it's no excuse. When an injustice occurs in this world, we as Jews must be sensitive and alert and alarmed. When a lynching occurs in America in 2020, we have to recognize it and speak out. We cannot allow COVID announcements to consume us, and we cannot drift off into a fantasy land of distraction. Kiddush Hashem demands that we remain engaged in the lives of our families and our community around us. That means that when we have the opportunity to perform a mitzvah, an act of loving kindness, we must do it. It means that when we recognize injustice, we have to scream it out from the mountaintop. It means that this week, I watched the video of Arbery's death to make sure I opened my eyes, to make sure I stand now as a witness to his brutal murder. We cannot be lulled to sleep through the monotony or boredom or complacency of staying in our homes. It's time to wake up again to the needs of our brothers and sisters in our Adat Shalom community, in Israel, around our country, and around the world. It's time. It's time because this week marks the 75th anniversary of victory in Europe, marking the end of World War II. So many brave American soldiers died to defeat Nazism. They died defending our values of goodness. And this week, a man posted a video here in California wearing a mask with a swastika on it. Last week on May 1st, a woman walked through a reopened rally in Illinois with a sign that read, Arbeit macht frei, the German phrase that appears at the entrance of Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. All of this while we remember the brave American soldiers who died to defeat Nazism. Did they not lay down their lives to defeat senseless hate, bigotry, racism, injustice? I know this sermon isn't uplifting. It's serious. And I'm not sure what we can do about it at this moment other than recognizing that coronavirus cannot cause us to turn a blind eye. The goal of our synagogue community cannot only be that which requires a Zoom link. The goal of our sacred community must be Kiddush Hashem. Kiddush Hashem means that we never become desensitized to the loss of life, whether it's the incomprehensible tens of thousands who have lost their lives to coronavirus in this country, or whether it's the hundreds of thousands who died decades ago in Europe liberating our families, or whether it's simply a member of our community who passed away. Kiddush Hashem means that we never become desensitized to injustice, even if it occurs across the country, even if it occurs across the world. It's time. May God comfort all those who knew and loved Ahmaud Arbery. And let us all say, Amen.